Hi, I'm Lane from LainTCG, and today I have a video on a BT-7 survival guide, specifically against the Tier 1 decks that are currently in the format. This is going to be a somewhat generic look into how to play around the most present decks in the new meta. I am aware that while I was writing the script for this, that a ban list has been announced, so take everything on this with a grain of salt. Things may change around as, bans are announced, but if they somehow manage to dodge banning some of the more egregious things in the format, this is still going to be fairly accurate, so keep that in mind. Alright, let's get into the rest. So, I think I should preface this by what this is and isn't a guide for. I want everybody to know that if you're playing jank decks, I love you. I appreciate you. Honestly, you make the game a lot more fun. But, this probably isn't for that. I would love to hear about your crazy deck ideas and how it gets to do its thing. But this deck is mostly just going to be beneficial to you for knowing what your deck may be hosed by or what it's really good against. Not win cons for your deck specifically into everything. This is more just kind of how to take apart the top decks. This is a guide about the weak points for all of the strong decks that I care to include a meta-analysis for, and I think I have an understanding enough to drill in on. I may be wrong on some. For instance, while I know what Blue Hybrid does and how it works, I haven't gotten to do extremely thorough testing on it myself, and I have gotten to play against it since time of writing, but I've labbed some with it and I know what it does. So this is generally an overview of the top cut of the meta with some of the contenders' strengths and weaknesses. Again, take it with a grain of salt because a ban list is coming 2.5 weeks from time of recording, and it'll go into effect at the end of the month, so things may change around a bit, but if things are left alone in any of these decks, it's still going to be pretty accurate. And honestly, if you know how to go against a deck before it's banned, like any of the pieces are limited or banned, you're going to be able to take care of it even better when it's actually, not at full power. So let's get into the first deck, which should be Numon. So, Numon strengths. Numon has the most card draw potential out of every single deck that exists in the game at the moment, which makes it more consistent than every other deck at executing its game plan. Because everything has a fairly low play cost, it can also get to the level 5s that actually matter very quickly and push for game as early as turn 3 if the player has a perfect open and draws. Also, because the deck's level 3s don't really matter for consistency other than Ukamon, it can run any level 3 black floodgate that interacts strongly into the local meta. So if you have a meta that runs a lot of memory gain Digimon or boosts specifically, Chumon counters that. And then Chikuri specifically if you're into a lot of mirrors because it counters Death X, just wiping your whole shit. And Kokuomon, which is one that hasn't really been super present in the American meta as of yet, but is extremely present in the Japanese meta. Kokuomon makes it so that you cannot ignore Digivolution requirements, so you can't use, the Awakening of the Gold Knight option to go into Magna X, or for other sorts of, skip requirement sorts of things. And then also because DP minus lasts into the opponent's turn on everything in this deck that matters, and it being its primary form of removal, it basically gets around every single form of protection in the game. And if you're feeling like running something that's slightly less optimal, or if certain things are hit in this deck, the Warumonzemon that does D-Digivolve also technically exists in this package, which is another good way to get around any form of protection, because there really isn't anything that counters that at the moment. So, I want to go over its game plan and things that you should prioritize targeting. I have spoken with a handful of people who are newer to the game recently, and I figured that giving a just general target priority list for people who are getting into competitive may be helpful to you. So I wanted to include that as a thing going forward when I do this kind of specific breakdown. While this is more of a general overview, I will probably be doing more detailed deck analysis on things once I know how the meta sits after the ban list. But we'll get into that later. For now, though, we'll go over this. So Numon's game plan is that it wants to set up as wide of a board as possible, as quickly as possible, to tempo you out of the game. So basically, when they get into the Monze X, which is the most powerful card in the deck, they will constantly be removing things from your board until they can push for a win. At least that's how I play the deck. I am a bit more conservative with my pieces. I don't swing in randomly. I will just set up a board state and then constantly kill the pieces on the board so that I starve my opponent of resources. But there are a handful of other ways to play the deck. Other people will play it differently. But to do that, they're going to spam out their 3-cost level 4s, set up as many tamers as possible to benefit them or hinder your performance in the form of Emperor or Louis to spam their stuff out faster, or their tamer that gets them 1 memory and gives jamming to their whole board. So basically, they're going to do all of that and then move up into Monze X to spam out even more bodies and remove things from your board. Depending on the player, they may hold back until they can all but guarantee a win, which is my playstyle. But playing, to play more conservatively to get value off of every single one of their pieces, or if they're trying to go faster, they can chump in with any number of their small guys, especially the floodgate ones that are less important, to immediately start just removing things from the board so that they don't have a build up or have to worry about board wipes so much, and get rid of security. Because one of the things that I constantly see in my time playing the game is that the lower security your opponent has, the more worried they are and the more mistakes they end up making. And also, you'll want to know that anytime a level 5 is sitting on the board, just expect a Valkyremon Ace to be in hand. It won't always be. Most decks run it at 3, some run it at 4 if they're getting rid of Venus entirely, but if they have a level 5 on board, expect Valkyremon if you're going to swing at security and you're not trying to remove their stuff. So, the target priority list, just so we can go down the list. So if you see things on board, do 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, so on. So target priority number 1 is Monzemon X. Monzemon X is what makes the deck so strong. I honestly don't hope that they hit it in the ban list, because if they do, it will kill the entire deck. There are other things that can be taken out to make the deck more fair, but it is their most valuable piece on the board. So if you see it on the board and it is sitting on the board, kill it, because when it's on board, it will gain value for them by killing your stuff, or it'll just go into Valkyremon to get even more value by wiping your board. And then we go to number 2, which is the Valkyremon. So if they have a Valkyremon that's sitting on board, it will also just kind of pop things once security is removed. And the Ace Overflow is very helpful to you, but it is less of a priority target than Monzemon, because Monzemon can do upwards of minus 16,000 DP versus popping something that's 8k or less. Number 3 is Ukamon. Dealer's preference as far as you go, but both are kill on sight. I think that in this deck, the memory one can be a bit more problematic than the Searcher, but up to you. Either of them are good targets. Then from there, Numon or Garamon, because it can float them into Monzemon X pretty well. Number 5 is any Floodgate rookies. The Floodgate rookies should go up higher, specifically if your deck is hosed by the Floodgate specifically. But you probably figure that. Regardless, getting rid of the rookies is good for your overall game plan. Number 6 is Numon X. Numon X, you just shouldn't be hitting, especially if they have a platinum in the trash. If they don't, it's nice to get rid of just so that they can't float into a platinum later. And the least priority thing to hit in the whole deck is platinum. If it's on the board, it's just a 9k, and if you kill it, they can throw down a Monzemon and then go into Monze X the next turn. So just don't. If you can leave it on board, if you can afford to leave it on board, then it's fine. Don't worry about it. So, dealing with the deck. Numon has so much card draw because it needs it. As much as it can swarm the board, it only really pops off once you have exactly one of 4 or so cards in the deck, because Monzimon X is necessary for tempoing out the win if they're playing the long game. And if they don't have it, they can switch to a Rookie Rush style, but regardless, Monzimon X is required to, function if the game goes long. That crumbles in the face of any kind of board removal. So prioritize removing their level 5, specifically the Monza X, like I said earlier, and then so on. Ukamon just needs to be gotten rid of because they get so much value by it just being on the board. But this deck crumbles in the face of exactly Crimson Blaze or Death X. So if you're running red at all, running Crimson Blaze just kind of deals with the deck. You can basically play it out for 3 or less any single time and kill almost everything on the board, and then it doesn't float into other stuff. So, yeah. If they chump into security as well and they hit the Crimson, it'll just wipe their whole board and put off their winning turn. But with them, you just kind of need to get rid of the Monze and try to get them as little value as possible and hope that they don't get to the card. This is going to become a very present theme because all of the decks is just kind of either outspeed them or make it harder for them to get into their win con. But we'll get into the next one. So, Blue Hybrid. Blue Hybrid is a deck with a decent amount of card draw or consistency depending on the color of the base. Each base does one thing very well, and the deck itself does one thing extremely well, which is bouncing your Digimon to get rid of your security. The red base has strong card draw with Muchomon and an okay amount of search power with Bokomon and recursion on the Yoko egg. They can grab exactly Ancient Garurumon if it's in their trash with the egg because it has animal in its traits. And then the real strength of the red base is that it has access to Crimson Blaze to deal with Numon, though. As well as the option to recur the Ancient Garu to hand and play a Tamer out for a cost of 2. It gets to do both, so, it's good. The blue base, though, has a lot more search power, so it can consistently get Tamers into the hand as well as a hybrid trait Digimon so that you can do your combo more. But because it doesn't have board wipes, it really has some difficulty into Numemon. And you can run Ice Wall in both versions, so the red one is a bit better for the Numemon matchup, but again, depending on the ban list, that may no longer be so much of an issue. But that is just what it does. We'll get into its game plan next. So, game plan and priority targets. Blue Hybrid's game plan is to start setting up rookies to gain momentum by getting searches off or out of pushing up the Ukamon, getting draws by swinging with Uko or Mucho, or searching via Strabimon if they're running the blue base, and setting up Tamers while they search for their pieces. Due to all the recursion built into the deck and built into Ancient Garurumon, you can basically, when Ancient Guru dies, return a hybrid and a Tamer from your trash to your hand on death, and then as soon as you return the Tamer to the hand, you can play a Tamer back on the board. Once they start executing the combo, it's really easy to flow into the next one. So each time they go into Ancient Garurumon, they'll bounce your lowest level Digimon to your hand, and then the top of your security before it dies to clear the way for the next Ancient Garurumon. So the game plan is to push out rookies and do 2 or 3 chump attacks, and then when you have done that, you can go into an Ancient Garu combo, which then will, when it goes into it, will bounce one of your Digimon and then one of your security, and then they can do another check, which puts you at exactly either 1 or 0 security if they've already hit in 2 or 3 times. And then if they can get into an Ancient Guru or just a regular hybrid again, they win. So they only really need to execute the combo twice to win if you have no interaction. Target priority. If you have Tamer removal, you want to get rid of Koji just immediately. Or Hacker Judge. A lot of decks are running 1 or 2 Hacker Judge because it's a recurrable Tamer that you can pull out at the end of the turn every single turn. And then after that, if they end up bricking, not getting into Ancient Garu, you want to kill Kendo or Lobomon. Usually when they brick, it's on Kendo because you digivolve Kendo and then Lobomon on top, and Kendo draws when he swings. But yeah, no. If you see that on board and they're turned sideways especially, just kill them. You don't need to get into security as much as you just need that thing to not be on the board. Then Ukamon, for the same reason as Numemon, the longer it's out, the more value it gets. And then number 4 is Muchomon or Strabimon, depending on the base. Both of them, I mean, Muchomon gets more value than Strabimon does, granted. But them chipping in with rookies is one of the reasons why the deck can do the thing so well. And last is Ancient Garurumon. Generally, they're not going to be doing Ancient Garurumon that stays out into another Ancient Garurumon to pick up 2 security. It is something that they can do if they want to push for game. But Ancient Garuru should probably be your last target pick, because killing it just recurs the pieces for them to do it again. Most of the time it'll kill itself because of the Lobomon effect, but if it just manages to sit on board, like if they cross into it just to put one on board, leave it there. It's totally fine just being there. Okay, how do you beat it? So going about beating it depends on what you're playing and also the color base. I didn't really include what you do with the blue base as much with this, but I'll talk about it as well. So if your opponent's on the red base and you're playing Numemon or a rushdown strategy, don't be precious with your pieces. Chip in as fast as possible. You can outspeed the deck, because the deck needs to get all of its pieces in hand to do the combo. And building up huge boards just to be Crimson Blazed hurts, so you go fast. You swing as quickly as possible, as fast as possible, and you can outspeed them. And then with the blue base, you can set up more for one big lethal turn, because they're not going to have Crimson Blaze to be in the back, while they will bounce stuff if they go into Ancient Garuru. If you're running a Rookie Rush strategy, you don't care. If they just bounce like a 3-cost Numemon or a Floodgate or something to your hand, who cares? That's totally fine. So basically, with the blue base, you want to not swing into security as much as possible if they don't already have a Koji on the board, so that you do not give them Koji. And then you go all at once. So red, aggro as quickly as possible, and blue, setting up for one lethal push actually helps you more so that you don't give them pieces in the trash. And then, if you're on Dexter Goromon, kill your opponent's Koji or Hacker Judges on sight if they only have one by digivolving into your Doragora. And set up that you can snowball off of their small guys. Like, if they still have rookies out, just keep killing them. You do not need to go into security. You do not want to give them tamers. Just kill their small guys on board and throw things out from your trash. The deck is basically a countdown deck. Once they get their pieces in hand enough to execute the combo twice, they just win. So the more pressure you put on them to have it in their hand or kill their pieces to slow down the clock, the better off you are. If they ever do a desperation swing with Kendo to draw and it stays on the board, kill it immediately if they don't get the combo going off of that one draw, because it will kill you later and you want it to be gone. So this is how you beat it. Again, theme of this whole video is the top decks currently rely on one extremely strong thing, and the quicker you can beat them so that they don't get the extremely strong thing, the better off you are. But if they're already in it, then try to tempo it out or try to just slow their game plan down as much as possible. So, Vaccine Armor. I don't have the middle section on the deck's game plan with this one, or the priority targets, because I've already made a video on Yellow Vaccine. You should go watch it. I made it on the Vaccine engine with Patamon. Regardless, you should go watch that. It goes into the game plan of the strategy quite a bit more. I can just give a general overview. But honestly, I'm just putting the strengths in the game plan on this slide because I've already gone over this, and it's really good. Vaccine Armor has the strongest turn 2 possible in the game at the moment. You set yourself up by having a Patamon, TK, and a level 4 in your opener, like in your opening hand. You can immediately go into an armor form in your security and go +2 on memory for the effort. So you put a Patamon in back, do a TK, take the top of your security, put a level 4 on bottom of security, and then when you push out next turn, check your security, Digivolve into the armor, gain a memory off of the TK for modulating your security, and gain a memory off the Patamon. You go +2 off of getting a free Digivolution. It's crazy. It then goes into Magnamon X while modulating security to trigger the when Digivolving DP plus and immunity to your opponent's effects so that you can get free swings into security. It does it really consistently because the yellow base for this deck just constantly is picking things up and putting things back down in security, and it only cares about something leaving a security, not your opponent's. Also, due to the strength of yellow's DP minus on things like Heaven's Judgment, as well as the ace cards that are used in this deck to an extent, it has an extremely easy time removing opponent's strong Digimon from the board, and if you have Rapidmon X, usually you're running less Rapidmon X than Magna X's in this deck. If your opponent's running something like Numon or a Rookie Rush strategy, it makes it extremely hard for them to swing, because when they swing, they die. Yellow Vaccine Armor, just as a deck, is insane. Does a lot of stuff. If they have a Magnamon X on the board, and you have any way to remove it, do that. Otherwise, if they have a Patamon that's just sitting on the board because it missed its timing, that is the next priority target. After that, it's their armors or anything else that they have that are good. If you somehow have a way to get rid of Tamers, Tamers aren't the hugest priority in this deck, though getting rid of TKs and things like that definitely isn't a bad idea so that they don't gain so much memory off of every single one of their plays. So, how do you beat Yellow Vaccine? Honestly, there's not a hugely good strategy for it. It just bricks. Yellow Vaccine is a high roll deck. The one saving grace of Vaccine Armor is that because it's a high roll strategy and requires a lot of pieces in specific places for it to function, it bricks a bit more frequently than everything else does. There's a reason why it was extremely good in JP format where it's best of one. It's still extremely good here because it does it consistently enough that it's not really a problem. But yeah, no, it can brick pretty hard. For their combo, they need a combination of Patamon, a Tamer, a level 4, and then Magna X, and an option or a level 5 to bridge into Magna X, which is a lot of cards to require. Or they need Patamon and the level 4 already in security set from the top of your deck as security in the beginning, as well as Magna X and a way to get into it. So they require to have at least 4 cards, sometimes 5 cards, and if they're doing it in the first turn, it's pretty hard to do. But if they have it, they just win. That's just how this deck works. Minimum, they need 4 or 5 cards to get into their unkillable boss monster, like I just said. And they'll just win if they have it. But if not, you can keep getting rid of their resources on board so they can't build up. The more I talk about my strategies for beating these decks, the more it comes off that I'm a black and a purple player. But I'm a black and a purple player. This is how you beat these decks. You can do it with other colors too. Those ones are just good for it. If they've gotten into Magna X, try and play around it as much as possible. Generally, they're going to have immunity, and Magna X, with its immunity procced, is bigger than a lot of the format at the moment. So you're going to have a hard time swinging over it, but because of the way that it procs immunity, it's only going to be able to swing once per turn, unlike the blue base. So you need to play around that. It'll only unsuspend once as well, so if you can swing many times around it, you're also good. Use the fact that they only have the one actionable body on board at most times to your advantage if you can swarm into security by going around it. Most of your small bodies can be cleared by Heaven's Judgment, so again, don't be too precious with them. And blocker tag is your best friend against Magnamon X, especially if they don't have a way to proc security on the turn. If you can keep it vulnerable, you can do so much more. So, do your best to stop their swings and keep yourself up on tempo as much as possible. If you can get around it, good. If you can't, it's how it goes. And sometimes this deck just high rolls into a win. That's just how it works. So, be aware of it. Know what it's trying to do, and you'll have a better time playing around it, at least. So, Blue Base Magnamon X. Blue Base Magnamon X was the deck that I was betting on last set. Well, not last set, previous to that, but you know what I mean. Last main release, Magnamon X was the thing that I was betting on hugely, and it just kind of fell on its face because it didn't do the thing as fast as most of the other decks did. But now, it has a new support card. Blue Base Magna X is back in a big way, and all it took was one promo that's over $30 currently because it's a box topper. The new Flame Dramon promo makes this deck extremely good. There's a reason why the Blue Base one was the one that was winning so much in Japan during this set. It's because it's cracked. So, the deck previously suffered from not having ways to proc immunity for the big guy against certain other decks. But with Promo Flame Dramon, that's not an issue anymore. You don't need to worry about it at all. It's got strong card draw from Promo Vmon, from its Inherit, and it not being once per turn, as well as some of the best searchers in the game, combined with Tamers that can cheat them out for free. Not to mention that every level 4 is either inherently, or with the option, in Flame Dramon's case, can go into Magnamon X and put even more pressure on the board. Also, unlike Armor Vaccine, the Magna X for this one is almost always sitting at 13k because of the egg, giving it plus 1,000, or 16 from the so 13 or 16 once it procs immunity, but it can also be 15 to 18 because of the blue-red Vmon giving plus 2,000 as the inherit for it. He is a wall that is nearly impossible to get over. So it's frustrating. It's frustrating. It's a really good deck, and if you have the stuff for it, you should think about it. The blue base is pretty easy to get. The sample decks, like the New York City Comic-Con sample decks, are pretty cheap to get the promos that you need for a lot of the stuff. And, Magna X is expensive, but he's really kind of the one expensive card in this deck. So it's a pretty good deck if you want to play something that's tier 1. Aside from, Flame Dramon being $30 currently. Hopefully it goes down, but promos tend not to. So, unfortunately, we'll see on that part. So, the blue deck's game plans and targets. The current game plan of the deck is to take a few setup turns to get Magnamon X in hand, as well as a Davis or two on the board, and a promo Flame Dramon to proc protection. Once they have the line, you Digivolve into Magnamon X, and if you don't pass the turn when you Digivolve into it, you can add more aggro by immediately having immunity and proccing immunity again and making it even bigger, and you pass on a giant wall, or if you have to pass immediately, it's still a giant wall. So, he does a pretty good job of that. And then for the rest of the game, they do use a combination of the new Flame Dramon that has the raid ability that when an attack target is switched, they pick up the top of their security. That also, works if they have to block you. And then it procs protection and immunity on their Magnamon X, which gives them a free swing. Previously, the blue version basically had to swing in, proc immunity on the swing, and hope that they didn't hit an option, and then unsuspend and swing again. This is a bit more of a conservative way to play it, but also not really, because when you swing Flame Dramon, because it's an armor, it purges the armor on top, and the Vmon is still alive. So you're removing a security to swing into something that may die, and then swinging with something for free into security after that. It's pretty crazy. Worst case scenario, they can rush you down with VMons and Magnamons because it still functions as a good blue rookie rush deck. Your priority targets for this deck is Magnamon X if it's on the board and sticks around because there's a clock on the game if he's there. And honestly, good luck on outing him. He's even bigger in the yellow one. He's even bigger than the yellow version. But if you can get rid of him, it definitely saves you some time. And then if they somehow keep a Flame Demon on board after they use it for the raid, eliminate it immediately because it generates a ton of value for the deck. And then VMons prioritize the promo and the red-blue over the others because of the value that they add to the board with the memory that they give back, and also the red-blue with the plus 2,000 is really good for the Magna X, so get rid of it for that as well. And then Magnamon. If they've passed turn on a Magnamon, you're probably safe leaving it alone if it's not the very early turns. But if they get the ST, like the starter deck Magnamon, out of security, get rid of it quickly just in case, because maybe they have the Magna X and they were bricking on a Magnamon. Regardless, this is just kind of my flowchart. Yours may be different. Everybody has a different priority thing, but this is just something to keep in mind if you're going against it. So, winning against it. I've mentioned it before, but it's a bit of a pattern. A lot of the best decks in this format need exactly one card for their strategies to work, and for this one it's Magnamon X. Running interference so that they can't keep guys on the board and use their immunity to kill you is the name of the game with this one. Either go so fast that they don't see their win con before you win, or get rid of all of their pieces so that they can't. The deck can't easily recur Magnas from trash, and to search for it, they need to play rookies on board, generally, that can fuel the strategy in the first place. So if you can kill the rookies regularly, or clear the regular Magnas before they can get the big guy or go into him, they can't do it. They can't just drop it. They need the armor under it. So if you can just keep getting rid of their resources, then they can't play the game. Also, if you're running Numon, creating a wide enough board to make it so that you can DP minus it to death because it lasts into the next turn with the Monzax also works, while giving you enough guys to chump down once the big guy's gone. There's not a ton you can really do with a lot of various strategies against this deck. You can hope that a lot of things will work, but really it's just about speed and getting around their guy, and also hoping that they brick a little bit. Everything else comes with time and skill, but this is just sort of, a general overview on how to beat these things. A lot of it comes down to speed, knowing your deck, and knowing what to play around, and knowing how their deck works. So Imperial. Imperial was never a bad strategy, but now it has new support, which makes it even better, and unfortunately, you're going to have to deal with it, because people really like this deck. Now it has options to give their giant stack protection, as like the form of a delay card on the board. It has a new tamer that plays level 4s from sources anytime that it would die, and also an ace that fucks with the idea that you're ever going to play Millith again, or any purple deck that's not exactly Dex or Agora, while it's relevant to the meta. At least you can't modulate your trash anymore in a way that matters. It does what it did before, but now even harder and with slightly more consistency and a harder to get rid of top end. So, yay! I don't know. This deck is frustrating, but, we'll talk about it. So, their game plan. Imperial wants to create one big DNA stack that can swing multiple times with jamming and piercing. Their level 5 swings multiple times. Their level 6 swings multiple times. So on. To get there, they'll use every searcher possible to get up an XVmon and a Stingmon for their plays, which is frequently where they jam with this deck. And then once they get into Paledramon, the game can become tough because they can just kind of skip up the lines now that they have the option protection. So generally they'll go into the new one that has partition, strip as many sources as possible while turning everything sideways and stunning your board for a turn, which makes it hard to really do anything. And then they'll swing twice through your Digimon, because the Stingmon gives piercing and the XVmon gives jamming, to clean up your security some and also thin your board. If they have it, they'll also set up for Imperialmon Fighter Mode, which, when they do that, they'll return something to the bottom of your deck with less sources than it, because it's a DNA deck. Most of the time they will have more sources than you, especially combined with the fact that they get rid of sources going into Paildramon. And then when they attack, they will unsuspend and bottom deck something else. And if you attempt to out it at this point, because it's an ace, and you want the memory overflow, they'll go into the new ace when you try and swing into it, or if you try and out it with an option and they have their delay protection on the board, they'll go into the new ace, get rid of all sources on your side of the board as well as your trash, and put it on the bottom of your deck. Or they'll put all of their trash to the bottom of their deck if you're playing a mill out strategy. Unfortunately for them, though, now that it's a level 7, it has no protection, but it also can bottom deck when attacking stuff that doesn't have any sources, so even more things to play around. Their game plan basically is to just, get into the line and start swinging as much as possible while stunning your board and getting rid of things on board to slow you down. The priority targets for this deck, if they haven't gone into their level 5 yet, or higher than level 5, is the Stingmon and XVmons, or their rookies. So I don't know why, at least this is my experience, they seem to jam more frequently on Stingmon. So if you have a choice between a Stingmon and an XVmon, kill the Stingmon. If neither are on board yet and they're not in level 5 or above, kill any rookies on board. Their tamer will constantly spam them out, the one that plays the that plays a Wormmon or a Vmon. So they'll be playing out the searchers over and over again. If you can kill them while they're on board so that they don't come back to hand and that they can't use it as material or further searches, that is great. And then you have to switch into a different mode once they're in level 5 or higher, because they're no longer in the build-up stage. You need to use anything you can to get rid of the level 5s, the level 6s, and then the level 7. Basically, you need to force them to use the option protection if they have it to keep their stuff on board. And remember that if they float up enough that they go into the level 7, it has no more protection. And because of the way that the deck works and it has 2 aces in the stack, they'll pass you back 9 total memory if you remove the stack and they're on the level 7 and they have the fighter mode under it. So if you have to use something like a Rival's Barrage to kill it, you will be fully refunded for your effort. So force them to have it, force them to keep it on board, and then get rid of it if at all possible once it's so bloated that, it can't do anything anymore. So I'm going to get into problems of the deck, ways that you can beat it. Honestly, it suffers from the same DNA deck problems that almost every other ones do. While this one has extremely strong effects, making 2 bodies, even though they're low to the ground, like level 4, can be fairly difficult, even if they can play one out for fairly cheap with a 4-cost Stingmon. While this deck has a lot more search power than most other DNA decks, having 2 dedicated searchers for tamers, that tamers and Digimon in the line, as well as a tamer that can play one for free every single turn cycle, you can exploit the time that it takes for them to get into it. They frequently, not always, but frequently, will jam on an XVmon or a Stingmon, and if you can just keep removing their pieces, it turns up the time that it takes for them to get in there. Sometimes they'll end up trying to rookie rush you down, but this deck does not have nearly as many rookies as blue base Magnamon does, so every single one makes the game much more difficult for them. If they have the tamer that spams searchers, kill the searchers before they bounce back to the hand, and if they have a level 4 out but haven't gotten to the top end, punish it on sight. immediately. Once they're in the top end, DP minus is the best way to clear them while ignoring the new option. But if you have Doragora, swinging into a level 5 and making them have the level 6 is not the worst play if you haven't seen it in a search yet. Because the partition does not proc off of battle, you also get more value out of that. So it's just a thing of like making them have it and then making them have all of the ways to not die to your stuff. You want to pick this deck apart early so that you don't have to deal with it late, but otherwise you just want to have enough removal to out the whole stack so that you don't have to deal with it later. And then once it's in the trash, you're going to have a much easier time because it's much harder to float into a second one with a DNA deck. Honestly, the general overview for this is that if you have a deck that has the ability to, picking your opponent's board apart in the current meta is one of the best possible things that you can do. Most of the top tier decks are extremely piece reliant at the moment, and swinging into security isn't always the correct play at the moment. Against blue hybrid, if they aren't on the red base, it's frequently actually the incorrect play if they don't already have a Koji or two on board. If you're playing with something that has raid, like Wargreymon, or has good deletion effects, knowing your priority targets and going at tearing up their board before securing your game can be extremely good. And if you're on a rookie rush strategy, knowing when to chip in and how fast to chip in to get your game is extremely vital. Knowing your matchup and knowing if you can be precious with your small guys if you're playing a rush deck, or if building up a horde for one strong push is the correct move is vital. Being able to switch gears with your deck and try something that's different than your base strategy, especially if your base strategy isn't working, is a skill that comes with time as you play more competitively. But the more you work at it and the more that you face top tier decks, the more accustomed to it you'll become. I am, again, for the first time, going to acknowledge the memes behind me. For people who are new to the game, or people who are new to the competitive scene, every time that you face a top tier deck, especially if you're playing something that's more jank or tier 1.5 or tier 2 or lower, or honestly if you're new to playing tier 1 decks and you're going against other tier 1 decks, watch how your opponent plays their deck, look at what it does. If you can analyze what kind of plays they make and how they make it, also if you're at a local with the same competitive players frequently, knowing how they play over time and knowing how they make their plays, whether they're the type of person to be precious with their pieces or whether they're the type that just rushes in to try and win the game early and put that pressure on you of not having security so that you misplay, is vital. There's a ton of learning moments that you can take from every single match that you play, and doing that and just taking the time to think about your performance at the end of the night, or thinking about, well, I struggled in this matchup because of this, or I had a hard time because of this, is a way to speed up improving at the game much quicker than otherwise. It's really tempting, especially in the moment. I mean, I do it too, to like look where the piece that you're missing is, see, oh, it's 6 cards down. I didn't see my combo piece and I lost. That's really tempting. And sometimes that is the reason that you lose, especially with how most of these top tier decks are extremely piece reliant. But to be able to analyze when you did see all of your pieces, where you lost, why you lost, will make you improve much, much faster than otherwise. When I started the game, I started around Beelsmon. I played Beelsmon a lot. But I only really started to get good at the game overall and not just a Beelsmon deck when the Hunters deck came out. Because the Hunters deck started teaching me the exact moment that I lost. I could look back at the deck and back at my performance in a set and see exactly the mistake that I made that made me lose because of how many actions that deck has to take and how many things you have to do in particular. And taking that kind of mindset into your competitive games is the way to improve. You don't always do it. Sometimes you don't have the mental bandwidth to do it, but if you're testing against friends or if you're testing against competitive players who are willing to sit down and talk with you about like what mistakes that they think that you're making or other things like that, you will improve much faster. So keep it in mind. That's just kind of an overview of this. Currently, try and take their boards apart. This is advice again from a black-purple player, but taking their board apart is one of the best ways to deal with the current meta, at least in my opinion, and, make them have it. Ace cards only are interaction if they have them, so, do what you can. Honestly, thank God for banlists. So please like and subscribe, share this with your community or friends who are getting into the competitive scene. My advice may change a little bit depending on the ban list, honestly. If you can take apart the top decks, though, currently before the ban list, especially with a non-tier 1 deck, it'll be much easier after, most likely. If you want a heads up on what will probably be good going into the format after the ban list, look at decks Doragoromon or Tyrant. Depending on if Patamon sees limits, Vaccine will also be extremely dominant. If they skip over Patamon, because Patamon's not a huge problem in the Japanese meta at the moment, to nerf something like Emissary, hop on Vaccine immediately if you want free wins, because Patamon's crazy. As much as it's a high roll deck, so is Beelsmon, and Beelsmon was extremely dominant for the moment that it was dominant. So yeah, that's about it. I have a deck profile on Tyrant. It's slightly different now that the promo is out. The promo is very good. Look at that. But I will also probably be making a Dexter Goromon deck. As I've been talking about being a black and purple player, Dexter Goromon is the deck that I am on this format, personally. So I will probably be making a deck profile on that shortly. If not, next week, probably 2 weeks from now. I may wait for the ban list because there's been some talk about Doragora potentially being limited, but we'll see. So please like and subscribe here to this video. Also, my Twitter and Twitch is LainTCG. I'm currently not streaming as much because I'm focusing more on the YouTube videos, but I would appreciate you coming out if I do stream. And my model is by Be a Big Shot or at Arabiataho, which is behind me. My banner is by Yo-Yoms on Twitter. Go follow him. He's a friend of mine. And then my logo is by Pinky Bird on Twitter or on VGen if you're looking to have a logo made. But yeah, that's about it. Thank you. Hope you have a nice day, and good luck at your locals.